We got Wes Durham. Wes Durham, ACC Network ESPN, joins us now on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Wes, what's up, man?
Not going to do it. I did it last week. I'm not doing it today. I'm not going to go after the net. I'm not doing it.
Fair enough. Where are you, by the way?
It's in town tonight.
I'll be in town. I'm at the Dean E. Smith
Okay.
Student Activity Center tonight, Joe, for the
Okay.
7 o'clock start between the University of Pittsburgh and the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Look, I can't keep track of your schedule sometimes. All I know is that it warms my heart.
I know it's amazing what happens when I get to do games, isn't it? It's amazing what happens when I get to do games.
And that's what I was going to say. It warms my heart that you're calling the games you should be calling, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Before we get to the game that you're calling tonight between North Carolina and Pitt, let's actually go back to last night in the ACC, which was pretty bonkers, right? Virginia Tech shoots nearly 60% and loses. Clemson can't buy a bucket. And then last night, Wake Forest suffers another close loss, this time to Duke. They're on a 4-game losing streak. To me, there's a Wake Forest discussion in the NCAA tournament. But to me, the fascinating part is coming from Duke's perspective, going into the game against North Carolina on Saturday. This is not an overwhelmingly – this is not a Duke team that's going to wow you. But in my observations of going to Cameron Indoor Stadium so far this season, this is certainly a Duke team that has something that last year's Duke team did not. And there's a level of fight to this Duke team that I like that last year's Duke team, despite the fact that they were more talented, did not have. And I think that'll be interesting on Saturday against Carolina.
Yeah, I think the scenario with Duke and Carolina Saturday is in some ways predicated on Duke's ability to score from the perimeter, number one. Okay. I think if it becomes a game on the block, I'm not sure that's advantageous to the Blue Devils. However, I mean, I'm guessing Derek Whitehead is a no-go Saturday. Was there any indication about where that is last night?
Shire, we'll probably get more indication tomorrow during Shire's availability ahead of the Carolina game, but I would say based on how he sounded last night, he would be a no-go.
Okay, so based on my experiences of seeing Duke in person, I would tell you that if Duke is a perimeter-driven team and is successful shooting threes, Duke will have a chance to win the game. However, if the game gets muddied up, if you will, that throws up one of their red flags. Look, I think they've got a good defensive team. I'm not sure it's like this, legacy defensive team.
No, but it's relative to college basketball right now, and they actually have one of the better defensive teams in college basketball.
They do, yeah. I mean, but what I'm thinking is that Duke will have to have an A++ defensive game and hit the shots they are getting against Carolina. The thing that I would be leery of with North Carolina is this. Remember, like last week, we talked about if Carolina ever gets the big three going. I wonder if we are on the verge and I think tonight will be interesting in that light to see if Carolina can get the big three going, because R.J. Davis is going to play. Caleb Love looked pretty solid to me in the workouts in terms of, and Hubert Davis, I think, talked earlier in the week on his radio show about Caleb Love getting in and early shooting and something he continually does, and they felt like he kind of rounded back into form a little bit at Syracuse. Combine those two guys with Baycott and maybe even Pete Nance, who had 21 last week against the Orange, that's a lot for Duke to handle on Saturday. Not saying Blue Devils can't win the game, because I've seen the thing enough to know Duke is plenty capable of winning the game, but I think it sets up for a very interesting Saturday night at Cameron.
Wes Durham, ACC Network ESPN, joining us here on the OG. Let's talk a little bit about Pitt, because they got Carolina the first time. You look a little bit at their resume, though, Wes, and they're a little bit like Wake. They're a little bit like Clemson, where I look at them and I'm like, they got some work to do. They got to put those work boots on. I wouldn't be resting on what you've done already. What do you make of this game for the Panthers and the shape that they're in, bringing their act on the road after beating Carolina up there?
I'm going to give the answer away, but I asked the question. What ACC schools won their last two visits to Smith Center?
Maybe Tony and Pitt.
No, it's Pitt.
Just Pitt.
Just Pitt.
The Cable brothers know. Clearly. Clearly they
Push
know.
the right buttons. They just beat Miami too. So I mean, they're in good position. They're a tough team. They're living a parallel life to NC State right now. They went to the portal. They got really good guards out of there, and they got an Ole Miss kid on top of that. I don't know what the heck my man Kermit was doing last year at Ole Miss, but he had two dudes. They're just not on his team anymore.
Well, and I'm gonna say this about Blake Henson. You start looking at Blake Henson's numbers in the league. Blake Henson's numbers in the league put him on, at least the second team ballot and probably some first team consideration potentially if Pitt runs this thing into a double bye in Greensboro. I mean, Blake Henson, Jamarius Burton is a terrific player, but Blake Henson's the reason they won the game the other day against Miami. Blake Henson was terrific in the second half. And look, I give Jeff Capel a lot of credit. I mean, the patience that Heather Light, the athletics director, gave Jeff Capel to build this thing and to get it right in the portal, good for him. Carolina tonight is going to have to play as well as Carolina has played, I think, in order to beat Pitt, just because of the confidence that, look, we saw them a week ago Wednesday at Louisville just destroy Louisville in the first 10 minutes of the game. Pitt has no problem going on the road and playing the bad guy. They
almost did it at Cameron. They almost did it at Cameron.
Yeah.
So
I was there too. I mean, that was a terrific game. So let's see how this Carolina team with 8 days off has kind of matured a little bit, and now that they're seemingly healthier a little bit, let's find out where Carolina is tonight too. I think this is a heck of a ball game. This ball game tonight, and I will throw in the Clemson-Miami game on Saturday, are two of the bigger games that I think will have a play in what ultimately the double bye and NCAA discussion teams are in the ACC.
Quick apologies to my Ole Miss people. Henson.
Iowa State.
No. He's from Ole Miss, but he's been hurt. Didn't play last year with Joyner, so that'll answer that question. Got to be healthy. Got to be on the floor.
So NC State's in action tonight, Wes. Florida State, that's the 9 o'clock tip. And then they got Georgia Tech on Saturday at 1 o'clock. But as we saw last night in the ACC, there's no nights off. Even Clemson can get got when they miss 17 shots in a row against Boston College.
Man.
There's just some fluky stuff, man. And that's why Gilio and I talked about this to start the show. Clemson fans and Wake Forest fans, and we're not singling them out specifically, but they've been the most vocal in the ACC about net, right? Like, here's Clemson atop the league, but they're net 60. What's going on here? Well, it's easy. Look at your quad 4 losses. You got some bad losses in the books. It's going to affect your numbers. Sure. That's not saying that they're a bad team and that you can't improve, but, don't lose to Boston College sometimes either.
Well, no question. And I think the other part you have to think about from a Clemson perspective is it's been a couple of weeks since they've scored 70 points or 65 points. And if you got Chase Hunter back in the lineup and he won the ball game for you at Florida State, Clemson just has to find its fastball again. They're still throwing the curve, but they got to find the fastball. They got to find the, 3-point shooting game. They got to find the transition game. Their defense has got to tighten up a little bit to where it was in the early half of the ACC. The good news for them is their margin of error is really no more dynamic than anybody else they're contending with.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And that's really where the ACC is as a whole, guys, when you think about it.
Margin of error across the league is very, very thin. I mean, unless we're talking about Louisville.
Yeah. Well, unless Georgia Tech and Louisville tonight, which is the pillow fight game of the week in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Man, if Louisville can't get over on Georgia Tech, it's a wrap, man. It's a wrap for their chances in the league.
Jackets apparently had a sprained ankle in the shoot-around today too, Gilio, to add to the flavor of the game, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha.